The Promises to Freedom Show, a journey to full recovery with Cord Beatty and Kat Hart.
Good morning. Today we're going to be talking in discussion about prayer meditation and a group called the Oxford Group and its founder, Frank Buchman.
Can you tell us the history of the Oxford Group? I'm interested in knowing what that is.
The Oxford Group was a Christian movement back in the early 20th century, and it was focused and founded by a man named Frank Buchman, who was an American Lutheran minister. The group's main focus was on personal enlightenment, personal change, spiritual awakening, a process that they called moral re-enlightenment.
I've heard that the Oxford Group specifically influenced our modern-day Alcoholics Anonymous. Can you talk about that?
You know, the Oxford Group back then influenced the development of Alcoholics Anonymous as we know it today. Mainly, the early members of the AA group, or the Alcoholics Anonymous organization, were originally members of the Oxford Group. They were a group that drew heavily from the Oxford Group's principles and practices in developing the AA program. In fact, AA's famous 12 steps that we know today,
right?
It's based on the principles of the Oxford Group and what they believed in.
So can you tell me a little bit more about Frank?
Yeah, Frank was a heck of a guy. He was a very charismatic leader of his organization, and he was a driving force behind that. And Frank had this belief in that personal change and spiritual renewal could bring a better world for all of us. You know, he wasn't really focused on alcoholism or addiction. He was more focused on spiritual renewal as bringing a better world for all of us to live in. Frank traveled extensively. In fact, I read a report once that his methodologies were so well recognized around the globe, he was summoned back to Europe by the Archdiocese to teach the principles of what he was teaching to others, to the Archdiocese of the Catholic Church. He traveled extensively, he gave talks, he led groups, he had a message that just resonated with so many people. And Buchman his influence on the Oxford Group in those days was so significant that the teachings continued to be studied and debated even today, which is why we're talking about it. You can also find this in the book, in my book.
Oh, Chapter 9.
Chapter
Actually,
9.
we were talking about that earlier. So I know you go into that quite a bit in Chapter 9. Can you tell us a little bit more about the Oxford Group's practices, specifically meditation? I understand that was a big deal for the Oxford Group, right?
Yeah, it was a huge deal. Buchman, he believed that the root of all problems, especially when it came to the issue of alcoholism and addiction, but the root of all problems, of our personal problems, were based on fear and selfishness within us. He believed that a solution to living without fear and without selfishness was to surrender one's life to the plan of God. He believed in that. He believed in a couple of different concepts that he taught. One of which I was really impressed with, as I wrote in the book, which was that human traits are what they called standards: selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, fear, and that absolutes were God's plan. So absolutes, or where God lives, is the exact opposite of that: unselfish. It's loving instead of resentful. It has faith instead of fear. It has honesty instead of dishonesty. So they have a belief in the four standards and the four absolutes, and then they would use prayer and meditation to decipher the two, or to distinguish the two.
So I understand he also was helping a young man I read this somewhere, that the young man put God at the top of his list, and he had a problem with God, so he put another O in there for good. Right?
He did. Yeah, put another O in the word God for good, and it made sense too that he would do that. Like you say, he was a very charismatic guy that taught. He taught so many different people. So it was such a great lesson in life. You know, let's talk and explore just a little bit about the four absolutes and the standards. If your prayer and meditation that they practiced in the Oxford Group, and they still do today. By the way, It should be mentioned that the Oxford group still practices today. In
Where?
the Cleveland, Ohio, Akron, Ohio area.
Okay.
You could go to those meetings out there. They called the four absolutes: honesty, unselfishness, love, and faith, or faith and purity. In other words, the opposite of unselfish, the opposite of selfishness, the opposite of dishonesty, and the opposite of fear. What it means is that if you were to pray, what they thought and they taught was that if you were to pray and ask for guidance, and what you received through prayer and meditation was anything that appeared selfish and dishonest or resentful and full of fear, that it was clearly from us as human beings, that it was not from deity, was not from a higher power, wasn't from God, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was from my own thinking. It was from my own head. So when you go back to the principles of how free do you want to be, the things that we teach at our center at Zion Healing, we teach everything about changing the way that we think, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Well, to change the way that I think, we've already recognized that we don't have the power to do that within. So might we consider turning to a higher power, surrendering to that, accepting and surrendering to that, and looking for guidance? If that was true, then it would be safe to say that guidance that I receive through my prayer and through my meditation that looks unselfish, that looks honest, looks loving, has faith attached to it or purity attached to it, came directly from a higher power, not from my human traits of my human head.
I really like that. So that's kind of the barometer, I guess, if we get confused. Is this from, higher thought, higher power, a deity, the divine, the source, God? Then we just hold it up against, is there any good in it, right? Is there any good at all? And if it's not, personally, I don't proceed if I'm not clear as to whether, it's good or not. We're told to take every thought captive, and really that doesn't mean we sit down at a desk, right, with a piece of paper and analyze every single thought. I mean, we have thousands and thousands of thoughts a day, right? But we get an overall sense, I feel like, of what is good and what feels right. Sometimes if something feels wrong, it's like, oh, this just feels so uncomfortable. You're headed in the right direction, right? If it feels uncomfortable, and I don't mean from a place of feeling bad. I mean, if it feels uncomfortable, keep going, right? Because if it felt comfortable, we'd stay in our misery. That's what I know for myself. I know that when I'm making changes, which is constantly, I grew up in a very volatile home.
Abusive.
Very physically abusive, emotionally abusive, with a mother who is mentally ill, clinically a sociopath, has no feeling of what she's doing is wrong.
Right.
Public flogging. There was a lot of that when I was growing up. I experienced a whole lot of trauma and didn't really label it as trauma. What I know clearly now is that I always had a sense that it was wrong, that there was something wrong, and I was going to seek an answer. The only thing that has been, forward moving and freeing for me is to look at the truth within the illusion. In other words, if it feels comfortable, is it the truth? Is it where I'm supposed to be going? Or is it comfortable in my subconscious based on my history? Right. And so you and I have talked about, a lot of things. In order for me to make a change, a big change, I have to let go of my history and step out into the unknown, because balance for me was the unknown. And so it felt uncomfortable. It felt wrong. Mm-hmm. Right? It was like, wow, no, I can't do this. And fear would come over me. And I feel like to the degree that we've had trauma, whether you're a war veteran, like you are, or whether you've had trauma from childhood or physical, mental abuse, whatever, I feel like there is such a ginormous sense of imbalance and really not trusting one's inner knowingness, because the subconscious from 0 to 7, that's when our life script is formed. From
Right.
0 to 7 years old. And I feel like parents really should be studying this and pass a test in order to have children to understand that from 0 to 7 years old, that's the life script. We're in a very slow brainwave, a theta brainwave, which is highly suggestible. It's coincidentally and interestingly enough, the same brainwave that occurs when we're in deep meditation, which is a theta brainwave, or hypnotherapy, or when we're listening to somebody and taking in the information without a filter. We're either in an alpha state, we're not analyzing it so much, which would be beta. We're in an alpha state, or we're in theta. We're just absorbing it like a sponge. And I love chapter 9 in this book, specifically because I do really relate to the origin of AA, which is, the Oxford group and where that came from. I love how you clearly define everything in this book. Well,
the chapter 9, prayer and meditation. Prayer without meditation, if you think about it, is not a very effective way to get an answer.
It never was. I was raised Catholic and lots of prayers, 10 Hail Marys, 5 Our Fathers, and did nothing.
Communication is a two-way street. Mm-hmm. So I can't communicate with somebody if I'm unwilling to listen. So if you to go out, like if our listeners don't understand the concept of meditation, there's like a plethora of books out there on every shelf of every Barnes & Noble about meditation, and there's a really good hint that you can look for if you want a good book on meditation. It will have the word meditation in the title.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, to demystify that word meditation, if I could for a second for interrupting you, to demystify that word meditation, people are like, well, what is it? Really, it's to go inside and to know yourself. That's what meditation is.
Yeah.
It's knowing yourself, but then connecting to something beyond yourself.
Yeah. Look up the word meditation. It means in our language, in our English dictionary, it means to listen. Mm-hmm. So if I'm going to pray and I'm unwilling to listen, isn't it like asking for something that I don't really want to have happen? Right? I mean, I'm just kind of playing around with something that I don't really want. Mm-hmm. In any relationship of any kind, your relationship, our relationship, I've got to communicate with you. I have to speak to you, and I have to listen to you, or I'm not going to be able to communicate. There's no one-way communication relationship. It does not work. We're talking about listening. Listening is meditation. So if I spent 30 minutes in meditation, I should have spent a fraction of that in prayer. Vice versa. If I spend 30 seconds in prayer saying, please help me, give me some guidance, and I'm listening, and then I'm willing to spend the next 30 minutes, 1 hour, 2 hours of my life listening. Now, how do we know? Then the big question is, how do I know what I'm receiving? The thing I loved about the Oxford group was this, and then I'm going to segue back to something that we were just talking about after the break. The thing I loved about the Oxford group the most in studying Frank Buchman and that group was that they had this all figured out. They could tell what was coming to them was from their own head, was from them. Mm-hmm, they could clearly see what was coming from God, higher power. Mm-hmm. They did this through a process of written prayer, written meditation, meaning that they would write down the prayer that they're going to ask, and then they would meditate, and without editing, without influence, they would write down what they receive. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with Promises to Freedom. And we're back talking about the Oxford group and Frank Buchman, prayer and meditation. So as I was saying, what they would do is they would write down the prayer they're going to ask, what they're asked. Then they would meditate as a group, unedited, unsolicited, and without cross-talking or speaking with each other, which is, by the way, still the way that they do these groups today. You go to an Oxford group, it doesn't look like an AA meeting. This is what they're doing.
So are they writing down a question, or are they writing down their intention or what they want to change in their life, or all of the above, or what?
They're picking a topic.
Okay.
Not 20 topics. How many times have we had these rambling prayers, right? You get up, you get to your knees, you get up in the morning, you're distraught, or sometime during your day, you've got these crashing worlds around you, and you hit your knees, and then you pray, and you say, please help me, I need this. I need some help and some guidance with this. And then you just kind of ramble, and you just go, and I need this, and I need this, and I need this, and I've got to have this, and if I don't get this done, and it's not, please, 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 please help me with all these different things. And then you say, amen. And you get up, and nothing changes, and you're back in the misery. It felt good for a minute because you knew fundamentally that this was some relief you were about to get when you hit your knees. But you got up and you went on. Still in the same anxiety, still in the same misery, still in the same depression, because you asked for 50 things.
Because nothing changes until something changes.
And you got this higher
Right.
power that's going, here's the answer to this one and this one and this one and this one. And you have no way of doing that, of listening to that and deciphering what the answers are. So what they taught is that you don't do that. You take one of those and you write it down. And you say, I need guidance. I'm going to pray. I need guidance and I need to receive answers to this specific issue that's plaguing me. And then they would spend as much time needed in quiet meditation, daily reflection, morning reflection and meditation, and they would write down verbatim what comes to them all throughout that meditation. Then they would take those standards and those absolutes, selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear on one side, unselfishness, honesty, love, faith on the other, and they would compare those to the answer of each line that they wrote. Write down this, right? So, to give you an example, I get up in the morning, Chris has really ticked me off. I got a problem with Chris.
Poor Chris.
Poor Chris.
Poor Chris.
Sorry, Chris. And Chris has really ticked me off, and he's really under my skin. And I go to prayer and meditation. God, I got a problem with Chris. He's a buddy of mine. He's a great friend. Don't want this between us. I'm seeking an answer. And I sit and I pray. I've done my prayer, and I meditate, and I got my piece of paper, and I write down, I'm going to tell Chris why I said what I said. Then I'm going to tell him why I got angry about what he said. Then I'm going to say, I'm going to give Chris a piece of my mind. I'm going to tell him, hey, I'm your employer, you're the employee, this is the way it is. And then I'm going to write down, maybe I need to ask Chris what's going on with him today. And then I go on past that and I write down, I'm in the right, Chris is in the wrong. And I keep going. And I stop at the end of this process and I compare these. Clearly, the one that I hit on is maybe I ought to ask Chris what's going on with him today. That's not selfish. That's honest. That requires faith that there could be an answer to this, right? It's loving. So it didn't come from my head. My head wrote down 50 other things except for that one.
So how large is your ego?
You see the process?
Yeah.
So you touched on a couple of things a minute ago, Katie, and I'd like to have you share with our listeners a deeper thought on meditation. You've learned a lot about this, over and above what we're talking about, and where it could take us in quiet meditation, daily reflection.
So for myself, I started meditating several years ago and really didn't, or thought I was meditating and didn't really get anywhere. It wasn't until recently that I actually went to a week-long retreat, a Joe Dispenza retreat, and really immersed myself 110% in that. And there were several different meditation techniques that I learned that I'm still practicing since then. I was in a week-long retreat in Dallas in October. It was 7 full days. And I can tell you that everything that is being studied today in neuroscience, neuroplasticity, neuroendocrinology, epigenetics points to the fact that every thought creates a chemical reaction. Mm-hmm. The thoughts of anxiety, for instance, create a chemical reaction and produce the end result is stress hormones. Turns out stress hormones are very addicting. And so when we're focusing on, or when I was focusing on things that of my childhood, say, that it was actually making my brain worse. And although I intellectually understood it, it was never explained the way that it was explained at this retreat, and the way that you and I are discussing as well. And meditation for me is getting out of my own personality and connecting to a higher realm, higher power, God. I personally have an issue calling God God or naming God anything, but for purposes of explaining myself, I'm going to use the word God. I feel that to name that which is not nameless, that is limitless, is actually limiting that which that power is. And so we will call that power God for right now. But again, I have issue with that because of the limiting, potential. What I've learned in meditation is that we are connected to that power, that power, God, created us, that I don't create myself, but I do influence my personal reality. In other words, I can create my own reality based on my thoughts, and I've seen it. I understand that the power that created me, God, is not a Budinsky. God isn't going to say, oh, wait, Katie, you're thinking the wrong thoughts. It's my job, like with the Oxford group, to take every thought captive, to be like, no, this is not good. This isn't, in 1 Corinthians, it says, whatever is pure, whatever is holy, whatever is of good rapport, think on these things. The master that walked this earth years ago, and, I'm not thumping on a Bible. I don't belong to any church affiliation at all, but truth is truth. Folks, truth is truth, bottom line. And if you want to send me nasty emails, go ahead. But truth is truth. And I will hold on to truth until the day that I pass and continue past then.
Yeah, well, you're right about that. I often say to my students at the center that there was only one guru. He walked this earth about 2,000 years ago. Nobody's ever trumped that.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. But, I love that, in the end days there in the Garden of Gethsemane, he said, hey, the place I go to, you can't go with me right now. Right. And I'm going to prepare a place for you. So when you pass, it'll be all beautiful and mansions for you and everything. But I'm not going to leave you. I'm going to leave you with something, with my spirit. And so I feel like that is my connection to science calls it the quantum field. Mm-hmm. Religion calls that field God. Yeah. Buddha, Allah, whatever. It's all the same energy. And what I know is that if it is pure, holy, if it is, like you said, unselfish or honest, right, not self-serving, flowing, if there's no chaos involved, then I'm connected. And in meditation for me, I go in meditation with a clear intention of what it is that I'm either wanting to work through, process, and give over to that higher power, basically, and to God, and just sit there with Him and say, hey, I can't do this. I can't do anything apart from you. I am so limited in my own humanness, in my own ego, and I can't do this. And so for me, that's fully conceding, like we've been talking about the last couple of shows. Yep. It's fully conceding that I can't do anything apart from you. And anything that I do here in my own power, in my own ego, is limiting. Right. It's pretty simple, It just took me so many years to get to that point, and I don't know why. I really don't. And if I could do it all over again, I would have this information and integrated in my cellular structure. Well, I think
you hit on a great a great point, which is what we covered earlier in some of our other shows, which is that if I can concede that I have no power, and that there is, and in my step 2 work, I'm recognizing that there is somebody that does, other than me, a power greater than I, then I've got to ask myself a question, and that is, if there is really a source that has all power and knowledge, where is the best place for me to go to find that power and knowledge that I need? It's obviously to go to the source. And so how many years I've spent myself, of my life, even in the deepest, darkest places of my life, living in that deep, dark place without prayer and meditation. That's a lonely place to be. And there are so many people probably listening to this today that are living in a very deep, very dark place, and they have forgotten that there's a fundamental issue here. There's a fundamental idea that's born within them.
A fundamental truth.
Truth.
In every cell.
In every cell, they know that that's out there. Mm-hmm. What they don't know is how to tap into it, how to communicate with it, how to listen to it, and how to get the answers that they need, which is what we're talking about here today.
Totally. And the thing is I think it's important, and I wish somebody would have said this to me back in those dark despair days. It's not your fault.
Right.
Listen to these words carefully. It is not your fault if you're feeling anxiety, depression, if you have addiction, if you have issues, anger, it's not your fault. However, it is important that we take responsibility for what we think, what we say. Again, take every thought captive, what we do, and so in meditation, I'm like, guide and direct my actions, guide and direct every word that comes out of my mouth. That doesn't mean I don't fall here and there from grace, I do, but the idea is, how long does it take me to get up once I've fallen? Do I sit and beat myself up, thereby focusing on what I just did, which keeps that energy alive? Or do I move on and create other thoughts, which produce other chemicals, neurology, changing my neurochemistry?
Well, you're hitting on a subject, too, about the people that stay in that. For a number of years, Katie, I spent, as you know, for a number of years, about 7 long-suffering years, I spent dedicating my life to a daily meeting of AA to stay sober. Didn't do the work, didn't do any of the work, didn't do the step work. I did none of the work, but I would go to an AA meeting every day because somebody told me that was the secret to a healthy sobriety and freedom and happiness. And it was not happiness.
No. And on that thought, we were just chatting about this morning. It was somebody who was
Amos. I believe his name will come to me here in just a minute.
But he was saying something. I was sharing with you. I was like, you've got to listen to this. This is really good. And it was on YouTube. And he was a teacher, a pastor, actually, I think in a Lutheran church, actually. Maybe not. Anyway, he was saying that, that Buckman was saying it's not important to go to meetings every day. It's not about the meetings. It's more important that you
pray and meditate.
Prayer and meditation.
Prayer and meditation is the secret to a healthy life of sobriety. Prayer and meditation is the only secret to that.
The meetings can help support that, but It's not about the meetings. And then you were saying, that's why AA is less effective than it was years ago. When it first started years ago, it was like 85% efficacy. Like 85% of people were staying sober.
That's correct.
And now it's
about 5%, 2%, depending on what state you live in. Come on.
Really? So it's about going to the meetings. Like that works?
Yeah.
So why aren't we changing that?
We get stuck in that. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with Promises to Freedom.
We are heating up.
We're back. Let's talk about step 11 in chapter 9. Step 11 says, I sought through prayer and meditation to establish a better connection with God.
Conscious contact.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
But it goes on. The second part of that says, praying only for His knowledge of His will for me and the tools or the power to carry that out.
Why?
Why? Because I don't have the power. I've already recognized I don't have the power. So I've gone to the source that I know is all power. I fundamentally knew it. Then I went through my step 2. We've talked about that. I came to believe. I went through my step 3. I do believe. I have surrendered. I've fully conceded, surrendered. I've done all of those things. I'm prayer and meditation. So now I am either living that life in prayer and meditation, getting what I need, or I'm still self-delusional. So if I'm going to a meeting every day, like I did for 7 years, am I not really self-delusional, as I read back in my step 2? Aren't I still living a life managing my disease? Am I not really driven by 100 forms of fears they talked about, self-delusion, self-seeking, self-pity that we read on page 62 of the big book? I went through all of that during that 7 years. Talked about being self-delusional, going to a meeting thinking that is the key to my sobriety.
Well, that's the thing. Like you're saying, going to a meeting, as if going to a meeting or going anywhere is going to actually change the interior. Right. We have to take responsibility for our thoughts and stop being so darn lazy. I mean, I think that's the thing. Like we chatted about this, I think the first or second show that we had. It's just we are living in an age where I feel like we are in epidemic proportions of laziness, and there's no excuse for not having the information. There's no excuse for not having this information. We've got the internet. We are in the information age. Dig in, get off your butt, get off your entitlement horse, and do something different. Stop complaining about it. It's not, I've been hearing a lot of people going, I've had trauma. I've had
Right.
trauma. Really,
I've
what
had
kind of trauma have you had?
Or I have
people.
a therapist.
Well,
and
that's
the therapist is my answer.
and that's the thing. If you're not talking about your therapist, you're not with the in crowd. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Is do something. Don't just talk about it.
Get up
Do
and do
something. I am. You are. So many people are. Chris is. I'm really passionate about it. I'm not angry about it, but I'm really passionate about it because I dug in. And if I can get through my stuff and continue to get through my stuff, we're living in a world where a lot of people are like, wow, it's just a terrible world. It is what you focus it on, right? Yeah. I mean, Scripture says this. Here I am thumping on the Bible, and I don't even go to church or belong to any religion. But Scripture says this: the kingdom of heaven is at hand. What does that mean? That means right here, right now, you can connect. We can connect consciously with the one who created us right here, right now, and feel the joy, feel the happiness in the midst of the chaos of the world, right? Yeah. It's not about arguing and waging war against my God, your God. World wars are waged against my God, your God. But Eckhart Tolle says, go ahead and argue the infinite. My infinite, your infinite. It becomes ridiculous, right? We're talking about an infinite source. That means nothing is too great.
Correct.
But for us
source,
it is.
And we forget that all we have to do is
tap in.
Tap in and
Tune
listen.
in.
It's called
Turn
listening.
on.
Yeah. Meditation and listening. We do. You hit on this. People are into. There's like this New Ager movement going on where people are into talking about, I have a trauma, or I had a traumatic this or a traumatic that, or have trauma over this or that, and we kind of get hung up on that and stuck on it. And I've got guys around us. We've got guys around us. Look at Jim. We just had a guy join our board, Jim Amos, founder of UPS Store. He's sitting on our board of directors. This guy, if you were to read his bio on where he came from.
Extensive.
Mm-hmm. And he was a Vietnam veteran, a highly decorated Vietnam veteran.
Marine, right?
Marine. Purple Heart.
Lots of awards.
Wounded. Lots of awards. And you don't see him stuck on traumas of my childhood or this or that.
Yeah, I saw people blown up. I mean, come on.
He's not. He's focused on life. He's a guy that is extremely spiritual. He prays, he meditates, he seeks guidance, he moves, and this guy built the largest rebranding of any franchise in world history. He built it from the ground up.
Over 5,000 UPS stores right now.
Yeah, and over 80, I believe, over 80 licenses, 80 different countries.
Yeah.
He doesn't sit around talking about poor me.
No.
This guy's moving.
Well, that's a really good, valid point because we become what we focus on. We've heard the old saying, you are who you hang around. Well, but we become what we talk about. So in other words, if we talk about, I've had trauma, what kind of chemicals are we producing?
Negative.
Poor me.
Yeah.
Sadness, all the chemicals of stress, the stress hormone.
Yeah, stress.
The body is not designed to stay in stress. Animals out in the wild, when a deer gets chased by a wolf pack, there's stress hormones that are released. Now, unlike a deer, we have this frontal lobe, okay? When the deer senses danger, all of a sudden they kick into high gear. They run, fight, or hide, right? Of course, they're not going to fight with a wolf pack. But the moment that threat or danger is over, those stress hormones are released and gone out of the body. And so the body goes back to homeostasis or balance. With us, the more we talk about the stress that we've had, the more that we talk about that guy that cut me off, or I'm going to go get him, the more we focus on that stuff that is not pure or holy, of good rapport, that is unselfish, that is loving, that is not joyful, the moment we focus on stuff that is not that, the bigger it gets. And all of a sudden it's taking on this new monster, and now I need a therapist, and now I'm going to get into a group that's going to talk about nothing but that. I went to a lot of AA meetings. I went to NA, I went to CA, I went to, adult children of alcoholics. Both my parents are alcoholics. My mom's an alcoholic. My dad passed from an overdose of alcohol. I, held his hand as he took his last breath, as every organ shut down. So I come from a long line. My grandfather started AA meetings in San Francisco years ago.
Yep, your uncle started the AA
Phil.
movement within the Justice Reinvestment Initiative in all of the jails in the
So this
in the
goes
US.
really deep in my cellular structure, and I just, every meeting that I've personally been to, I've never left the meeting feeling better or uplifted, or I've always felt like, man, I just feel so heavy. I just always felt like I wanted to go home and pull the covers over my head. What is going on?
Well, isn't it that we talk about that if I'm going to a meeting of either AA, NA, CA, whatever church, if I'm going to any one of those meetings, I'm either hearing what I need to get better spiritually or I'm getting worse. So if I focus on everybody else's misery, what is that doing to me? If I'm living in the self-delusion that's where I'm going to stay sober and free, is listening to that.
And going to meetings.
That issue right there, driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-pity, self-seeking, is what we're talking about. That's what those people are doing. Mm-hmm. If I'm participating in that, and if I'm that self-delusional, how would I ever know how just self-deluded my thinking really is? I don't have the power to know the difference between self-deluded and not. I have a higher power that does, and I'm unwilling to go to him, unwilling to ask and listen. It's like asking a fish, what's water? And the fish says, I don't know, it's just everywhere. I don't know. The question for me, when we look at all of those things, is simple. Can I rely on myself to make it through my life without drinking and using? I have alcoholism, and I have addiction coursing through my body and my DNA that's not going away. It's in remission, but it's not going away. I don't have to fight it every day. I have to practice prayer and meditation every day. Mm-hmm. Can I rely on myself without that to make it through without drinking and using because of my disease? The answer is absolutely not. I have to have knowledge. I have to have power. It's absolutely essential for me that I maintain a strict discipline of prayer, meditation, Step 12 principles of helping other people, of being a good person. There's no way I could make it through. I'll relapse. I'll be using again.
Let's go back to what you just said, knowledge. I don't want to skip over that at all. I need knowledge.
Seek knowledge.
Right? I mean, and that's what the Joe Dispenza week-long retreat did for me as well. I mean, I spent lots of years. I as soon as I left the house, at an early age, at the home, I joined a cult. Didn't know it was a cult, but it was a spinoff of Scientology. I was just looking for truth. I was like the little lost bird that jumped out of the nest in the Dr. Seuss book, Are You My Mother? And all I was wanting to do was I used to draw this picture of this circle. It was like, here's me, this little dot at the top. And I just feel like all I need to do is just all I want to do is get back home. But I don't know how. And so I was seeking everything that I possibly could just to get some relief. And, all I really needed to do was be still. Just go within instead of looking outside for the answers. The answers for my inside were never outside. But so why do we think it is? Well, I'll tell you why. Again, it wasn't my fault. The media pulls us away from it. Video games, the social media, the television, movies, whatever, pulls us away from all that. So if you're focusing, if you've got any kind of imbalance in your life, from the vantage that I am, the place where I'm at right now, I would say to you, put it down. Mm-hmm. Put down whatever it is that's burdening you. Stop looking for a cookie cutter answer and know that the answer is very simple. Look, why would a loving creator make things so difficult? I'm going to make life really difficult for you, okay? There's this loving creator. I'm going to make things really difficult for you. It's going to be really hard, and you're probably never going to get to feeling good.
Not. That's not going to happen.
That's bullpucky.
We have to be conscious of God's presence or higher power. And to do that, you have to explore prayer and meditation, or you won't be conscious.
Still.
You have to be still. Yeah. I remember there's a promise that we read on, I believe it's page 85 in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, where we find the 12 steps. And it says something like this. It says something like, if we carefully follow these directions, we begin to feel this sense of the flow of God's Spirit into us. To some extent, I become God conscious. So if I'm not following his directions, how am I going to feel that, to get that what I need, get those things that I need to feel his spirit around me, to move me in the right direction. I began to develop this vital sixth sense of his direction for me, of what he needs from me, of where I'm supposed to go. That's an amazing promise. I can tell you for a fact that the alcoholic that you're listening to doesn't want to do that. That's not what I want to do. I don't want to do the disciplines of that every day. I'd rather be flying. I love flying. I would rather be playing golf. I'd rather be climbing mountains. I would rather be doing anything but working on those issues, because I'm human, and that's what consumes my mind.
But you've explained to me that you actually look forward to it.
But I look forward to it
because of what it brings you.
Because of the freedom that it brings me on a daily basis. So I don't ask God to keep me sober every day. Why would I ever do that? In fact, thinking about that, I believe I wrote that in my book as well. I only asked God to keep me sober one time. I've never asked him that again. Why would I? Wouldn't that be questioning the power of God?
Totally.
Wouldn't that be saying I don't really believe it?
I don't trust you.
Don't trust it? Wouldn't that be me being settled in with going to a meeting every day and being madder than hell at God because he didn't keep me sober today when I asked him to? Wouldn't I be managing my disease? I don't want to manage my disease. I wanted to put it in remission and be done with it. My experience with my disease has always shown me that those things never kept me sober. Never did anything for my sobriety. It didn't keep me sober. It didn't keep me spiritually fit. I relapsed and I used again over and over and over again. So why am I willing to do these simple disciplines? Yeah, I am, because it's essential for me or it'll kill me. That disease will take my life. Being in a place of neutrality and safe and protected from my disease of alcoholism and addiction, that's why I do it. It's not because I want to do it. I look forward to it because it brings me this place of freedom, of peace, of serenity every single day. I feel serenity and peace and protected. It's like having this coat of armor on that nobody can penetrate. You want to cut me off in traffic? Well, you must need the road more than me, brother.
Yeah.
You want to take a swing at me? I'll back up.
Yeah, there's nothing like that space of feeling connected.
Yeah.
There's nothing like it, and it just, it's pretty amazing. I look forward to it every day.
We'll come right back. We're going to talk a little bit more about Step 11, prayer and meditation. We'll be right back. All right, we're back. We were talking about the Oxford group, prayer and meditation, Step 11 work. The authors of our 12-step program and the authors of the founders of the Oxford group gave us very specific instructions on what to do on a daily basis to find freedom and peace and serenity.
You bet. I'd like to personally talk about the early pioneers of AA and prayer and meditation even more.
A little bit more.
Yeah, of the history there. Like, how did we get so far away from focusing on prayer and meditation, and the focus more being on you need to get a sponsor and you need to go to meetings every day and you need to call your sponsor every day? Like, what the heck? That's not even written in the book, right? I mean,
I think it's because of the fact that no one in the organizations, and most in our treatment center we do, at Zion Healing and Zion Recovery, we make it a point to take all of our people all the way through the 12 steps. Sometimes we do it twice.
As they were written.
As they were written and they were meant to be. No one does that. Most treatment centers will never take somebody through all 12 steps because there's too many people there, usually, or because the instructors have made a decision that therapy is a better way or group therapy is a better way. But nonetheless, no one really takes them through all the way through the 12 steps. What we usually do, and we did at the retreat at Zion for years and years, originally would take steps 1 through like 3 or 4, and we'd get in. We've never really got into prayer and meditation, never really got there. They don't do that in AA meetings. They don't do that in NA meetings and CA meetings, and they don't do that in treatment centers today. I don't know why.
Can you imagine, though, if they did?
I don't know why.
Can you imagine if they opened every meeting and every group meeting in treatment centers, every AA meeting, every CA, NA, AA, GA, whatever, with prayer and meditation?
Or written,
for the first 30 minutes?
Written prayer and meditation.
For the first, can you imagine the energy in that room?
Let's pray, and then let's discuss Let's do what the Oxford group did.
Yeah.
Then, instead of telling a drunkalogue or the misery of my life,
No kidding.
I would open my mouth and say, I'm Cord, I'm a recovered alcoholic. I want to talk about what I just experienced.
Mm-hmm.
This was the problem that was plaguing me. This is what I prayed for this morning. These are the answers that I received. And then I opened it up to you to talk to me about that. Now, if I'm a newcomer sitting in that meeting and this happens,
Talk about encouraging.
now I'm hearing a message of hope that no one has
Totally.
ever given me. No one has ever said, there's the answer.
Yep.
That's what I'm missing. No. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Can you imagine what would happen with the AA movement if that was the principle that we taught today? If we said the answer to your freedom is to
Connect.
get with somebody in this room, work through every single one of these steps, and then hit on this step 11 and continue a life of prayer and meditation. And if you're going to come to a meeting, guess what? Every time you come to this meeting, we're going to start with written prayer, written meditation, and we're going to share what we receive.
Yeah.
Not, oh, I got drunk, I got divorced, I got filed bankruptcy, went to jail. The guy beat me up and put me in jail, and I wrecked my car, and my girlfriend left me, and I can't believe that my life is so miserable, and pour me another drink. I'm just so miserable. And I'm sure glad that you're here today for me, people. And I'm just so glad that I'm sober, just hanging on by
One
my
day at a
nails
time.
today. No. But if in the opposite, if I heard, I prayed this morning because I'm struggling in my relationship with my significant other, and she has made a decision to leave me, and I don't know how to stop that. And she means everything to me. Can you help me? And what I write down is, you need to go to her in a sympathetic way, in a compassionate way, in a humble way, and ask her what's going on. And please talk to me. Let's work this out. Please talk to me. Don't shut down on me. It's not your fault. My disease or these things that are happening or my drinking or whatever, whatever the consequences are, I'm a participant in all of this. And I have a responsibility. So I first want to start out by making an amends to you. See, because I've learned these principles. I'm following these principles.
Knowledge.
I've got this knowledge. I want to make an amends to you for what I said and what I've been doing. I know it's wronged you. I know it's hurt you. My intention is to try to salvage this relationship. That is only my intention. That was my step 9 work, right? I'm using all of this. They don't teach this in treatment today. Well, we do. They don't teach this in AA meetings today.
Well, I'd like to let go of that absolute. There might be a
Yes.
center somewhere
Yeah.
in the middle of nowhere that actually does teach that
I would
center.
like to
So
see
we
them
want to
do
applaud
more.
you if you do that. But
I
it's
will-
our
I will-
experience. We haven't seen anybody else do that.
It's why you hear people in AA meetings with 25 years of sobriety getting up and telling people in a meeting, I have 25 years of sobriety and I drank today. This is why. It's not because they stopped going to meetings. It's not because they've got a fiance that left them. It's not. It's only because they have the disease of addiction, primarily, and secondary that they stopped praying and stopped meditating.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah. Or maybe they never did or learned to begin with. They're just relying on meetings as a crutch to keep them sober.
Correct.
Is that real sobriety? Like, we've had that discussion too numerous times.
No.
Is that truly sobriety?
It's not.
Just because you're not using?
If I'm asking God to keep me sober one day at a time, if this is the way I'm living, if I'm asking God to keep me sober just one day at a time, then wouldn't everybody listening here have to agree that I'm living my life with some reservation about my disease,
Yeah.
about what I have, and
Doubt.
about who God is,
Yeah.
right? If I'm living a life of reservation about who I am, right, and what I need to stay sober and stay free, then I might want to stop right here. Actually go back through the steps. Go back through step 1. Look at that fully conceding moment. Am I really trying to manage this? Am I trying to manage something that's unmanageable?
Being brutally honest.
Yeah. I remember getting to this point in my work with my mentor. And he said, he was hitting on this topic. We were at step 11. And he said, do you feel like that you have surrendered, you fully conceded, you've gone past that, do you feel like you've fully surrendered, accepted and fully surrendered? And do you feel like at this point that you've turned this over, this unmanageable disease over, and that you can no longer manage, that you've turned it over and you've stepped past it? I said, not really. He shut the book. He slid it back across to me and he said these words, and so we began. You see? So if I'm at this point in my life and I'm not getting it, maybe I ought to take a hard look at step one, at the fully conceding to the powerlessness of my life, the unmanageability of my life, and let's start there.
And in Hollywood, we say, back to one. Roll camera.
and back to this. So we'll close with this. The point of all of this is this. If I'm unwilling to practice any of the principles of what we've been talking about today, and I'm living with reservation about my issues, about who God is, and if I'm living with this reservation at this point, then just how manageable is my life? I've got to face that. And
totally. You have no connection with the higher consciousness at all. You're limited, very, in your ego.
Correct.
Miserably ever after.
Yeah.
Why? When the answer's so simple, why wouldn't you just dig in and do the work?
Do the work.
Why not? Stop being so lazy. Get off the sofa. No more bonbons. Get going.
I'd like to send everybody listening over to ZionHealing.com.
Did you mean to say ZionHealing.com? I'm sure I quite got that.
And there you'll find some answers. And if, you know what, folks, if you're suffering and your life is that unmanageable and you're really struggling with the issues we're talking about, there are some answers out there. Whether you come to our center or you don't, if you make a phone call to us, we're going to help you. We will help you on your way. Make the phone call. All right? Next week, we hope to have Mickey Bush. He was supposed to be here today, but I believe he's going to chime in with us next week.
Awesome. The answers are easier than you think. Join us. There's power in numbers, and we just want everybody to be free and be the best that they can be. So it's really pretty selfishly motivated, because when you bring your best and I bring my best, then we have a great old time. So come on, join us.
We'll see you next week until we meet again. Stay safe and stay sober.
Happy trails.
God bless.